This is not the set of a post-apocalyptic film. It's actually a fallout shelter located in the heart of Helsinki, Finland. Today, these are sports facilities, car parks, cafes, playrooms, and gyms. In times of emergency, this place will shelter thousands of people. They will enter through these heavy doors. Here is where they will wait out the worst. Their life will be organized. There will be carers for the children, a canteen, a daily schedule. The Finns have planned everything and are ready for even the most extreme scenarios. In Helsinki alone, they have 900,000 places in similar facilities. This means that everyone living in the city will have a place to escape to. However, the shelter system is just one example of how Finland's comprehensive security system works. A system that is a model for the entire world. And in this video, we will talk about perhaps the best security system in the world. Finland has what is called a comprehensive security system. It consists of many elements, but the one we should start with is the mentality behind it. Some time ago, this image made the rounds on the internet. It clearly shows the Finns are the most prepared to fight from all the nations of the EU. The most up-to-date figures show that up to 80% of Finns declare themselves ready to defend their homeland. It would be impossible to create a comprehensive security system without the support of the population and a readiness to defend themselves. But why are the Finns so willing to fight? Part of the answer lies in the lessons they have learned from history. To understand them, we need to go back several decades. The Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. At the time, the Germans and Russians divided Europe between themselves, including Finland, which was to be subjugated to the Soviets. The Soviets, encouraged by their conquest of Poland, attacked Finland on November 30th, 1939. Finland fought alone. Neither Sweden nor any other Western countries came to its aid. And while Poland was not saved by the British and the French, war was at least formally declared in its defense. In the case of Finland, international sympathy and a stream of volunteers ready to join the Finnish army was little more than a consolation prize. Churchill himself said of the USSR's demands towards Finland that they are, quote, fully natural and legitimate. He also said that the USSR has, quote, every reason to be a dominant power in the Baltic. The Finns were on their own. Despite the vast superiority of the Red Army, Finland resisted. After several months of fighting and huge Soviet losses, peace was established. Finland lost some of its important territories, but it retained its sovereignty. History will remember these events as the Winter War.
It was a huge experience for Finland, and it's kind of shaped our identity as Finns, because the Winter War is like this huge story for us it's kind of like it's a tragic story, but it's also a success story, although we kind of lost the war, but we kept our independence. And many Finns have family members who fought in that war. So it's a very shared experience, and it affects our identity to this day.
The Second World War was a kind of existential experience for Finland, and not only tragic and negative, but also in a way, in the long run, positive, because Finland was able to avoid both Soviet occupation and German occupation, although Finland was allied with Germany between 1941 and 1944. And that then established a kind of memory, in a way a war that was something that Finns could be proud of.
Finns are not just proud of their history, they also learned specific lessons from it. The first one is that they must be united and work together.
When the Soviet Union attacked Finland in 1939 and the Winter War began, Finnish people united together against a common enemy. and during the Winter War and the continuation war, we fought very bravely. Of course, it was devastating and we had to give up some of our territory, and also a lot of people died. We kept our independence, and for the Finns it was kind of like victory. We survived the Soviet Union. So in the history we have this common experience that when we unite and fight together, we can win, or we can keep our country and keep our freedom. So we have the experience that we can do it together.
The experience of fighting alone is also important. It made the Finns realize that they have to take care of themselves.
This experience of that Finland had to fight alone was very strong. That we had to keep in memory that if large war would start in Europe, we could not count that anyone would come to help Finland. And in that situation, really had to think about how to defend. We had a kind of preparations for a guerrilla war against Soviet Union, but that was never spoken in public.
To this day, the Finns often speak of the spirit of the Winter War. They spoke about it, for example, during the COVID-19 pandemic.
The spirit of Winter War still relates to the idea that one should be able to defend oneself against a formidable enemy, and it may not bring you a victory, but it still may ensure your survival. And for the Finnish defense thinking, it's been always more about like muddling through than prevailing. You have a great power enemy, and still I think under these circumstances it's still absolutely vital, and I'd say that the spirit still forms a backbone of the pretty or very strong attitudes among the Finnish public when it comes to defending one's country.
The Finns have a word to describe their mentality, Sisu. And while it doesn't have an English equivalent, it is held by Finns to express their national character and fortitude.
It's perseverance, not giving up under any pressure, and even against overwhelming odds, a typical Finn would fight on. That's Sisu in a nutshell for me.
It's a mindset. It's not just a word. It keeps us pushing forward even in the almost impossible occasions, like the Winter War.
It's not only the past that makes Finns want to defend their homeland. The present is equally important. These are the results of the poll for the happiest country in the world. And for years now, Finland has been top of this list.
Our system is quite equal. Like, we have really high quality education system. We have healthcare. The working life is quite equal. Like, people from different backgrounds can pursue their dreams and have a life, like they can build their life as they wish. So we have a country and society that is worth defending. So people want to defend what we have.
We mentioned the lessons that the Finns have learned from history. But how does this translate into practice? For example, Finland never abolished conscription. The decision stems directly from the experience of the Winter War.
Only 2,000 Finnish civilians died during the war. And this is a totally different story in other parts of Eastern Europe, where half of the population, or more than those who died in the war, were civilians. So there's a very strong feeling and memory in Finland that the conscription army did its duty.
To this day, the conscript army is one of the pillars of the system. What does it look like in practice? Every man in Finland is obliged to undergo military training. Approximately 20,000 do this each year.
Tutaj służba wojskowa w zależności od preferencji.
Here, military service, depending on the conscript's preference, can last up to a year. After this training, the conscript is placed in the active reserve for several years. The adventure with the armed forces does not end there, because there are also exercises for reserve soldiers, which remind them of their wartime duties and update their training. It's a time when reservists can recall old equipment and familiarize themselves with new versions.
The system of compulsory military service is supported by as many as 81% of Finns. Of course, there are mechanisms in place to serve in a different capacity than in the army. However, conscription is still popular.
Yeah, it's still very strong. It's close to 80%, I would say more than 70% who do their service in the military. Of course, we have another option to have civil service on Finnish legislation, but most of them do their service in the military, yes.
The size of the Finnish army in peacetime is not impressive. It's only 8,500 soldiers. However, in wartime, this number balloons to as many as 280,000. The total number of reservists is as high as 870,000. And let's remember, Finland has a population of 5.5 million. This includes women, children, and the elderly. As we mentioned, compulsory military service only applies to men. However, this does not mean war and the military are just their domain. Women very often perform voluntary service. To discuss this, we meet Helena Immonen. Helena volunteered for the army a few years ago and was involved with the armed forces for several years. Today, she is a writer and author of the Red Fox book series, which is well known in Finland.
So I thought, even though I'm a woman and I don't have to go to the military, I felt like it is also my responsibility. I wanted to do that, and I still want to do that. I want to defend my country if I have to. So that was my motivation to go to the military service. Well, first of all, the service is the same for women and men, and women can apply any position and they can serve in any branch they wish. Some programs have like entrance tests, and the tests are same for women and men, and if a woman passes the test, then she can serve in that branch. So for women, there are no like different rules. Everything is the same.
Helena's is not an isolated case. There are 14,000 women in the reserve who can serve in the military during wartime. We began this film by showing a shelter in Hakaniemi in Helsinki. But there are many more such shelters. We can divide them into public shelters and private shelters. Together, they can accommodate 5 million people out of the 5.5 million in Finland today. This means that almost everyone has a space in a shelter. This shelter, Hakaniemi, is an example of a public shelter. This means that it is built and managed by the city. In case of an emergency, it can accommodate 6,000 people. To reach it, we have to descend 5 floors. People who are sheltered there could survive even a nuclear strike. Now, in peacetime, the public shelters are not empty. In fact, they're another underground city. There are cafes, gyms, sports facilities, and car parks. These businesses can operate there under one condition. They have to be ready to take down all their structures and equipment within 72 hours. That's why the walls in this gym look the way they do. Everything is well thought through. There will be organized places to sleep, eat, and even for entertainment. The roles have already been divided.
It's not just then the question of having them. Actually, at the moment, in many blocks of flats, they might be full of stuff. So then is it 72 hours or a certain time period within which, if an order is given, then you need to empty them out. And it's the responsibility of certain people in the housing society running the block of flats. So once again, rules, responsibilities, knowing what to do, being able to help others around you.
Even the division into groups has been thought through. The idea is to divide the residents of the shelter and to make a different daily plan for each group. For some, there will be an artificial day and night, so as to avoid everyone wanting to use the canteen or showers at the same time. And what's interesting is that the construction of the Hakaniemi shelter began in 1999, at a time when Russia was moving closer to the West, countries were disarming, and the concept of the end of history reigned in intellectual circles. Many thought there would never again be any great wars.
Jest to historia niesamowita, jeżeli pomyślimy.
It's an amazing story if you think about the mindset at the time and the fact that the whole Western world was focused on expeditionary operations, first the war in Afghanistan, then Iraq. It seemed that we were going to develop a peaceful coexistence with Russia, and meanwhile, the Finns were putting up another public shelter in Helsinki.
In Helsinki alone, there is room for 900,000 people in similar shelters. This is more than the population of the city itself. However, 85% of the shelters are private. Any building with more than 1,200 square meters must build its own shelters. This is the law in Finland. This means that these shelters are literally everywhere. We found this out early in our filming. One of the first things we saw when we arrived in the hotel in Helsinki was the entrance to the shelter. Rooms like these are in the vast majority of blocks of flats, shopping malls, office buildings, and others. It's also worth noting that shelters can be useful not only in the event of the most drastic but still unlikely events, such as a nuclear bomb explosion. They can come in handy even in the event of some natural disaster, the occurrence of which is much more probable. The way the shelters work perfectly shows that in the Finnish system, every citizen has a role to play. It could be to fight on the front line, but it could also be to be an entertainer for the children in the shelter.
But really, comprehensive security, it has this kind of an ethos that everyone has a role to play. And so kind of officially it's about cooperation between government sectors, but then we like to think that people in institutions, organizations, and also in so-called spontaneous organization, or really kind of like individuals and households even, have a role to play.
This is the village of Lapenranta. In a straight line, it's about 20 kilometers from the Russian border. Here, we meet representatives of the local MPK organization. MPK is Finland's largest organization coordinating military training. Organizations such as this have an extremely important role in the Finnish security system.
In Finland we have thousands of different associations, and our reservists of different officers, reservist NCOs, women association for the civil defenses, together we coordinate all those trainings. All the training support needed is coordinated by our association mainly from the defense forces.
Last year alone, around 20,000 people completed training. These are not only strictly military training courses, but also, for example, survival training in difficult conditions.
They are really popular, those survival courses. They are really, and surviving in the wood, the sea, whatever we have, and the winter time, it's really important to survive that. So they know how they must take some things with them when they are going to the forest and survive there. So it's really important.
The courses organized by MPK are very popular. People take part in them voluntarily, in their free time, as most of the training takes place at weekends. As MPK representatives told us, the oldest participant was well over 70 years old and had traveled specifically from Switzerland for the training. But the classes are also, and perhaps especially, popular with young people.
They are really. I was yesterday doing with those youngsters, 15, 16 years old. There was 60 people during the day, so and they were really interested of this, our courses and these training possibilities.
The popularity of strictly voluntary and non-compulsory military training is another example of how Finns are ready to defend themselves.
We all know that if we don't defend ourselves, we've seen around us what happens if you don't defend yourself. We saw what happened to the Estonians, we know what happened to Karelians on the Russian side, or the Ingrians got exterminated by Russians in the 1930s, so we know what will happen if we don't defend ourselves.
And this is where we come to another very important issue: the approach Finns take to Russia. Finland has the longest border with Russia of all NATO and European Union countries. The Finns understand the nature of the Russian regime very well.
We are not too surprised by what Russia is doing in Ukraine. And as a historian, I follow pretty much also the debate going on in other Nordic countries. They in a way are shocked and surprised, more surprised. Whereas in Finland we are not really surprised.
They also make no secret of the fact that they see Russia as their greatest threat.
Yeah, I think the ultimate threat, that is, like, let's say, determining the ambition of Finnish defense, is a full-scale invasion lasting for 4 years. And this is the threat picture against Finland is preparing for. But it's not seen very likely at the moment, but it can't be excluded. But right now, this is not like an immediate concern, it's a medium, longer term concern. And now the focus has been on the gray zone, aggression, hybrid stuff, disinformation. So this is the acute threat landscape in this neighborhood.
During the filming of this documentary, we spoke to many Finns, both on camera and off camera. What stood out from all these statements is, on the one hand, an awareness of the threat, but on the other hand, a great sense of calm. The Finns seem to be aware and prepared.
We are prepared, and we were prepared also during the Cold War, but you should not be too emotional about this. That's the Finnish attitude.
Not actually, not the current or everyday threat, but of course because of the history, the hundreds of years and thousands of years, that's part of the Finnish mentality that we do understand that there's the threat which can threaten Finland and our independence or national integrity comes from East, and that's Russia. Of course, it's part of Finnish mentality, but not the current threat or anything to be afraid of here in everyday life.
Something that often comes up as the most relevant threat is hybrid warfare. In this context, the situation at the border is crucial.
It's in general knowledge that in late 2023, the Russian government started the hybrid operation against Finland, maybe as a punishment for our NATO membership, who knows. But they started send in third country citizens, not checking their papers anymore across the border to Finland. So by our laws, it's illegal to do that. And as a countermeasure, the Finnish government decided to close down the eastern border, all the border crossing points on our eastern border with Russia.
The Border Guard is not only important in relation to current events, it is an established part of the entire system.
The Finnish Border Guard is by nature a military organization, and all of our professional border guards are also trained soldiers. But during peacetime, their operations are centered around border security, and they patrol the border with police powers. So during a peacetime, we are more or less a border police force. But in our deep background, we are still a military force. The Finnish Border Guard, throughout its history, has trained its own conscripts for our wartime reserve. So, if needed, and if by the government so decides, the Finnish Border Guard would be mobilized fully to its full wartime strength, and basically, perhaps we would be integrated into the Finnish defense forces accordingly.
Of all the elements of the comprehensive security system, perhaps the most important is the cooperation of institutions. We've mentioned in this video what officials, border guards, pro-defense associations do, but the key is that these organizations interact and complement each other. And without this, there would be no Finnish security system.
Well, I think the level of cooperation and how deep it runs through all the organizations in the country. I mean, even the major shopping chains are involved in emergency planning. Every organization is on some level mandated to take part in it, so it runs deeper. The different organizations talk to each other, and it's not like every government part is doing their own part, but it's on local level, it's very bilateral, and the different teams and different organizations work together in a lateral way. Also, that enables everybody to keep functioning even if the links to the higher command of government has been cut, so the local areas can still operate.
However, what does this look like in practice? One example is the Security Committee. Within it, representatives from services, emergency reserve agencies, law enforcement agencies, and many others meet regularly.
Przedstawiciele tych instytucji mają to miejsce.
Representatives of these institutions have this place where they can meet, talk, plan actions, exchange their reports, their analysis of the situation, and also jointly respond to crisis situations, so that there is no silo approach where one ministry or law enforcement agency does not know what the other is doing. Therefore, the circulation of information takes place within the entire public administration and the key ministries for ensuring security.
The fact that the Finns have developed such a model of cooperation between different institutions may be related to their mentality.
Możemy sięgnąć do naprawdę odległej historii i
We can look back at really distant history and at the inhospitable nature of this land and the fact that the harsh climate, the great frosts, reign in Finland. This has basically, since the dawn of the country's history, predisposed the population to work together to ensure security and baseline survival when it comes to agriculture for food.
Let's go back to the diagram we started with. The comprehensive security system consists of the elements we discussed earlier. The latter, added relatively recently, is NATO membership. For many years, the Finns did not want to enter the North Atlantic Treaty. Their opinion changed after seeing these images. The Russian attack on Ukraine has drastically changed the Finnish approach. The public had until then opposed NATO membership. Today, it is firmly in favor. This change happened practically overnight, from February 23rd to 24th, 2022.
I think it's very kind of common for Finnish people that when you are faced with the reality, you can change your mind pretty quickly when you understand what has to be done in this situation.
The public, followed by politicians, supported Finland's NATO membership.
All parties voted for joining NATO. Even the leftist party that is actually originally founded in Moscow in 1918, so even they voted for NATO.
That is how on April 4th, 2023, Finland became a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Teraz większość mieszkańców.
Today, the majority of the population is happy to be under this NATO umbrella, and NATO, the Allied Article 5 guarantees, are actually complementary to this Finnish system, which is focused on defending its own territory and based on a reserve army and conscription.
And the entire system is based on a political consensus. Traditionally, the major groupings cooperate on security policy issues. They work out decisions by consensus.
In Finland, we basically have a situation where, traditionally, the most important decisions required the agreement of the three largest groupings, namely the National Coalition, the Centre Party, and the Social Democratic Party. Recently, another party came into the picture, the Finns Party, known as the True Finns. The four groups work together on key issues, as was shown, for example, last year with the decision to restrict the right to asylum in border areas, requiring a constitutional derogation and a 5/6 majority in Parliament. Despite the various controversies around that majority was achieved.
However, consensus also, or perhaps above all, applies to more general issues of defense planning and policy. Strategic documents are traditionally signed by all major parties, over and above their divisions. This allows the Finns to plan for the long term.
Decisions that are made in one parliamentary term are then, as part of these multi-year plans, continued in subsequent terms.
The origins of this Finnish attitude also lie in their history. It was already outlined by Finland's legendary Winter War leader, Mannerheim.
Then again, in a situation when Finland had been, in practice, left alone to solve its relationship with Soviet Union. So I would say that in his memoirs, he is then strongly recommending that the Finns would remain united, that would be the only chance for Finns to survive. He could not really see that Finland one day could join the European Union and NATO.
And now we need to answer a very important question. namely whether the system can be adapted in other countries.
The Finnish system is a model for many countries. Now, especially for the last 2 years since the outbreak of the full-scale war in Ukraine, there has been an intense discussion on introducing Finnish solutions, especially among the Baltic neighbours. And here the discussion is really visible, whether it's in Lithuania, Latvia, and probably also in Poland.
The Finns themselves are thinking about exporting this system.
And let's say at the moment, in my current job, in RDI, yes, we are actually quite actively thinking about how to apply the comprehensive security model in different kinds of, let's say, European cooperation in research and development. But the point is then to, let's say, be humble to different kinds of cultural contexts. On the other hand, we have cooperation between different government sectors. And surely each nation and each society has their own challenges in that field, and they can be overcome. But it's not like we could just take the model and export it somewhere else. But perhaps when studying, researching, writing about the Finnish comprehensive security model, then the best features can perhaps be exported or applied to other contexts.
Our interviewee talked about the cultural context of each country, and this may be something that makes it difficult to apply Finnish solutions.
One of the key factors that I think is relevant here is the high social capital in the Nordic countries, such as Finland. By high social capital, I mean that there is a model of cooperation and certain cooperation between people, because in the far north, in cold countries, the basis for survival has always been cooperation between neighbours, between surrounding settlements. There is no such cooperation in the Baltic states, for example, or in countries that are much smaller. The social capital is not so high in Lithuania, Latvia or Estonia because of 50 years of Soviet occupation, social anomie, the severing of social ties. This could be a challenge for countries aspiring to adopt this system, both in the Baltic states, but also in other countries, such as those in Central Europe.
However, there are of course elements that are worth copying, despite the different social-cultural contexts.
System fiński, system całościowego bezpieczeństwa.
The Finnish comprehensive security system is a very interesting solution which should be looked at and analysed, and certainly many elements, especially those concerning legislation or interinstitutional cooperation, or the inclusion of non-state actors, non-governmental organisations, businesses, social organisations in the defence effort, are applicable beyond Finland's borders, and certain solutions from Finland can be transplanted to Europe.
The attempt to transfer Finnish solutions can be seen not only on national, but also on EU grounds. Last year, an important strategy document for the European Commission was published, the so-called Niinistö report.
Reading this report, one can notice that it is precisely issues such as the definition and the approach to security, holistic integrated management, and the inclusion of different sectors, and these are crucial. And this is basically what the entire European Union is now, to some extent, trying to do. To be more like Finland.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, take a look at our other stories on screen now. And don't forget to subscribe.